Welcome, welcome to History 121, Section 1, Summer. I'm Dr. Potter, and unfortunately, I cannot be here today because, well, I'm stuck in an airport. So, Dr. Ridenauer has been kind enough to come in and take attendance, and we'll have a normal class on Wednesday. Given the fact that the summer is so short, I cannot sacrifice any time. And so, therefore, I put together two brief lessons that I want you to look over. The material that I'm supplying to you now will appear on your first test. There are two required books for this course: America, a Narrative History, and, for the record, a Documentary History. Both should be available in the bookstore. Both are Volume 1. Volume 2 is used for the second half of this course. This course goes all the way up to 1865, but it begins here. Yes, I know you're thinking to yourself, this does not look like the beginning of the United States of America. But in fact, this is Clovis, New Mexico. And Clovis, New Mexico has the distinction of having the oldest recorded archaeological evidence of human habitation, going all the way back some 11,000 years. Now, I show you this picture because, needless to say, we don't really know what things were like in Clovis back 11,000 years ago. But at least this should give you a sense of what it was like at 9,000 BC. The first true evidence that we do have comes from what are commonly known as the archaic people. Most of their sites survive out in the desert southwest for obvious reasons. Rain and man can easily destroy things. We know that by roughly 2500 BC, the archaic people, the ancestors of modern day Native Americans, had domesticated animals. It's very easy to kind of trip up on stereotypes of Native Americans. We think of big headdresses and teepees, and we think that there's somehow some weird lack of sophistication. This is very far from the truth. Right now, you're looking at an artist's reconstruction of a archaeological site that's located in Mississippi around around 1000 BC, in what is now today known as Poverty Point, Mississippi. There was a significant city run by Native Americans. Now, if you think about this, in order to have a city of this size, and each one of those little small domes is a house, you have to have worked out certain things. You have to have a police force. You have to have a way of governing people. You have to have some form, however basic, of sanitation. Think about this. 1000 BC, Native Americans had a sophisticated culture, and this is just one of many sites. Most of the sites, unfortunately, in the continental United States do not look like this. This is Tenochtitlan, which is located near Mexico City in Mexico. Its name translates loosely as the City of the Gods. It was built sometime between 1000 BC and 250 Common Era. This is a sophisticated construction by any means. Part of the reason why it survives, whereas other sites in the United States do not, is because it's made with stone. And when you consider this is built using strictly human labor, it speaks to the sophistication of the people who created it. These are Anasazi dwellings, which are located in the cliffs around New Mexico and Arizona. We don't know a lot about the Anasazi, but we do know this much, that when the Spanish first arrived in the Southwest, they were shocked and somewhat frightened by the fact that people who had existed before the time of the Native Americans that they were interacting with had been able to build multi-storied structures, and those structures had survived. And of course, the beauty of it is they still survive to this day. Now, throughout North America, the main thing that united all people was maize, or as we know it, corn. Corn was a staple all the way from Mexico north almost to the Canadian border. It was a key element of trade, and it was easy to grow in multiple areas, which allowed people to survive. Also, as a whole grain, it was nutritious. This is Cuyahoga, Mississippi. It is probably the largest site in what is known as the Mississippian culture. Convenient, isn't it? Believe it or not, this site at one point in time, sometime around 1200 in the Common Era, had 15,000 inhabitants. And this is the thing, when these Mississippian sites were first discovered, sometimes the mounds might be visible, but if you figure when English explorers discovered this area, 500, 700 years had taken place. It's only with aviation, and especially with drones today, that we can see what these sites might have looked like. 15,000 people living in Mississippi, Native Americans. Native American culture was extremely successful and sophisticated. If we move up to the time of Columbus, so we're talking the 1490s, you can see the various peoples living in what is now the United States. But even this map is a simplification. There were over 300 distinct cultures. The sad thing, of course, is that these people were completely unprepared for Europeans. They were not prepared for the diseases we brought. In fact, there's a situation in which some Spanish explorers move up the Mississippi River, just meeting the people in the communities. In fact, the Spanish were the first to reach Virginia, coming in from the western end, getting all the way to what is today known as Saltville. They wrote about people living on both sides of the Mississippi River. The river was teeming with life. 50 years later, French explorers followed the Spanish, and there was nothing. Disease had wiped them all out. And what was not killed by diseases like smallpox and so forth, the people suffered from things that were spread by cockroaches and rats. Yes, that's right. Imagine a United States without cockroaches and rats. That is the United States, or at least what is we know today as the United States, before 1492. The thing is that we would not be here today if it were not for this gentleman in gray at the top. His name is Charles Martel, and I'm pretty sure none of you have ever heard of him. Charles Martel is the grandfather of probably the most famous of the medieval French kings, Charlemagne. Cursive writing was invented for Charlemagne because he was a warrior, but he wanted to learn to write. But history was truly made by Charlemagne's grandfather, Charles Martel. And you say, how? Well, Charles Martel was the leader of the Franks, modern French Europeans, at the Battle of Tours. And as you can see, Tours is just southwest of Paris. What Charles was fighting was a Muslim invasion, which had swept through North Africa, moved through Spain, and moved into central France. If Charles Martel had lost the Battle of Tours, it would have all been over. odds are we would be writing an Arabic script, and probably we would not necessarily even need to be in the North American continent. I say we would not need to be because, of course, all the trade routes that control spices, which would inspire people like Columbus, were controlled by Muslims. So if Charles had lost the Battle of Tours, we might have been totally comfortable to stay in Europe. But Charles didn't lose. Instead, he won. And as often happens in history, that has made all the difference.